Welcome to A Fine Time, The Nanny Revisited. This is the podcast about The Nanny, where we recap each episode and then discuss, sharing our own unique take on each episode. I'm Bernadette.
And I'm Debbie. Today, we're talking about episode 24, The Playwright. As usual, we're going to start with a brief summary of the episode. Brighton's science partner, Brooke, tries to get Brighton to ask her to the 7th grade dance, but he ignores the invitation because she's geeky, with an unflattering hairstyle, serious allergies, and a nasal voice. Fran encourages Brighton to ask her, warning him that God will punish you if he doesn't. When Brighton's school friends ask him who he's taking to the dance, he says, just an old friend. But when Brooke asks if her father should drive them, Brighton responds, I don't know what's in that inhaler, but I wouldn't operate heavy machinery, breaking poor Brooke's heart. Fran, who witnessed this, is so disappointed in Brighton that she scolds him on the cab ride home, only to be interrupted by the cab driver, who is a former classmate of hers, Jeffrey Needleman. We learned that Fran and the rest of the school tortured Jeffrey mercilessly, and that Fran had promised to go out with him on a date someday to prevent him from jumping off a ledge. Having just told Brighton that it's never too late to right a wrong you did to another human being, Fran can't escape the arrival of someday, despite her best efforts. At the restaurant, Jeffrey informs Fran that he wrote a play about what he's learned driving a cab. Having just witnessed Maxwell refuse to read Cece's therapist's play because he doesn't do business favors, Fran stops herself before identifying Maxwell as her boss. Jeffrey convinces Fran to do the hustle with him before asking her to marry him. When she refuses, he climbs out the window onto a ledge and again threatens to jump, saying if he can't have Fran, he has nothing to live for. To prevent him from jumping, she identifies Maxwell as her employer and drags Maxwell to the restaurant to read Jeffrey's play. When Maxwell announces his decision to option the play, Jeffrey falls and lands in a huge pile of garbage. Brighton ends up taking Brooke to the dance and is amazed when she arrives all dolled up with the assistance of God, Maybelline, and a half box of Kleenex. I think that basically covers everything. Did I miss anything, Bernadette?
Nope, I think you got it.
Awesome. Would you like to take us to scene 1?
Yes. So we begin in the living room, and Fran is folding laundry, and Niles is with her. And she does pull up some zebra, like, panties, kind of.
Briefs?
Yeah, that's correct. And she's like, "Oh, Mr. Sheffield," and then Niles kind of takes it and goes, "Yes again," and then he walks
Exactly.
out. And Fran's like, "Ooh."
Well, actually, I was going to ask, did you catch what her response, her comment was as he walked away?
Yeah. I that's way more than I needed to know.
Exactly, which is
About
so
him.
strange because Niles versus Maxwell, the owner of the underwear. That just
Mhm.
struck me. Continue. Sorry.
Yes. And then Brighton walks in with Brooke, who is a classmate, and apparently they've been friends for a while. Brighton indicates that Brooke is the genius, he's the dumb blonde.
Mhm.
Brooke has like long brown hair that's in pigtails, and she has like round glasses. And so you can tell she's like playing the stereotypical kind of nerd girl.
Mhm.
Um, they're working on a science project, and Fran notes that she and Val used to do science projects. What are they working on? Brooke says what they're working on. I didn't quite catch it, but it was like a long kind of thing.
I
Did you
listened to
get
it
it?
multiple times and I still couldn't get it or make
Yeah.
sense of it.
And then, but Fran's impressed, and she's like, "Oh, we just did potatoes on toothpicks."
Yep.
And then Brighton notes, "Well, did you know if you put pressure, on coal or whatever, you get diamonds?" And Fran notes, "Oh, that's fake. Val and I spent a whole summer going through a whole bag and didn't get anything, but now she has a handshake."
Right.
Yeah. Um, Brooke starts kind of like in a roundabout way, like going, talking about this. There's a 7th grade dance coming up, and
Mhm.
she asks if you know if Brighton has anybody, and then Brighton's like, "Yeah, I've got a couple of irons in the fire," and she's like, "Yeah, neither do I,"
Right.
which is funny. And then she's like, "Well, I'll go, I guess, by myself and stand on the side, like with the rest of the wallflowers." And, you can tell she's kind of trying to like hint to him to ask her, but Brighton is like, "Oh, good, so you're covered."
Yep.
And then her alarm goes off and it's time for her to take her allergy pill. So she gets up to go take it, and Fred asks her what she's allergic to, and she says everything but pollen.
Correct.
And but so Brooke leaves the room, and Fran immediately turns to Brighton and she throws socks at him.
Yes, that's how she gets his attention.
Like and she's like, Brighton, why don't you ask her, and all this kind of stuff. And I don't have the exact exchange, but at some point she's like, God will punish you, because she lets it go. She's like, she doesn't push it, and Brighton's like, aren't you gonna like
Say
force
anything.
me or something? Yeah. And she's like, no, God will punish you. But Brighton's like, her braids are like alfalfa, and she sounds all nasal, with her allergies and stuff. And Fran, of course, is offended, and she's like, a lot of men find it alluring.
Very alluring, actually.
Yes. And then though, at towards the end of their little conversation, and Niles is coming in, Brighton realizes, well, hey, if he asks Brooke to the dance, then he'll have an automatic A in science. And Niles notes in his dry tone, well, at least his heart is in the right place. And so Brighton exits, as Niles is saying that. And Fran shares an anecdote about going to a dance with a boy who had two left feet. And no, it was actually two left feet. His mother was an X-ray technician. It was some type of thing. And Niles is like, I'm confused. Could he dance or not? And Fran notes he was an excellent dancer, except for the hokey pokey. When you put your left foot in, the poor boy went down like a ton of bricks.
Yep.
So again, we're just kind of setting up in this scene the whole Brighton and Brooke dance situation.
Right.
Anything you wanted to add?
No, you actually hit every point I wanted to hit.
Yes.
Can
you take us to the school then?
I would be happy to. So in the next scene, we're at Brighton's school, and Brighton's hanging out with two other guys who we are to assume are his friends and classmates. And they ask, so Sheffield, who are you taking to the dance? And his answer is a vague, just an old friend. At which point Fran comes in, oh, hi, honey, I'm sorry I'm late. And they're like, yeah, I don't remember what kind of obnoxious thing the boys said, but it was clear that they thought that Fran was just the old friend that Brighton was taking to the dance. And he's like, no, she's just the nanny. And then he turns to them and says, but she wants me. And Fran's like, right. And Fran's like, excuse me? He's like, she wants me to go to the orthodontist. Yeah. Right. And so before they get a chance to, head on out to the orthodontist, Brooke shows up. Hi, Brighton. And the two boys are just the two boys who are not Brighton are just obnoxious.
Oh yeah.
They call her the Brookworm, and they say her name as if they're retching. Like they're not nice children.
No.
And poor Brooke explains to Brighton that she fell in the AV room and had to get a Band-Aid for her glasses, and then her inhaler broke or something.
Clogged.
And Fran clogged. Thank you. And Fran's like, honey, men like a little mystery. Don't share. And so anyway, the reason Brooke came up to Brighton was to ask, her father wanted to know if he should drive them on Friday night. And Brighton is a jerk. I think we can agree.
Yes.
And he says, what are you talking about? Or I don't know what you're talking about. And Brooke's like, you asked me to the dance. And Brighton says, look, I don't know what's in that inhaler, but I wouldn't operate heavy machinery. And you can tell. And Brooke's just crushed. She's totally, I mean, I don't blame her. A boy who, whether she had romantic, sights on him or not, there's something very cruel about being asked to the dance and then the guy back out like that in such a public fashion.
Especially there's been some hint that they've actually been friends. It's
Right.
unclear, but you know.
Right. No, I mean, Brighton refers to her in this scene as just an old friend. In a later scene, he says something about like we've been friends for a long time,
Mm-hmm.
so it's utterly crushing. And yeah, I don't blame Brooke. Do you want to add anything to that scene?
Well, I mean, Fran, of course, is aghast at
Yes.
the end of that, and Brighton, you made her wheeze.
Right. I think she also said, Brighton, I'm ashamed of you, or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, because it was, yeah, that was nasty.
It was mean and cold-hearted and cruel, and
Mm-hmm.
every little girl's worst nightmare, or hell, every I don't every person's worst nightmare, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Or at least up there.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, if you
You
don't
want to?
mind, I can take us then to the cab.
That would be perfect. Yeah.
So we're in the taxi. Fran has obviously been, um, chastising Brighton for a very long time. It's been since 68th Street. Brighton's kind of like, when is this going to end? And she's like, okay, well, when we get to Bergdorf's, I'll start slapping.
Yep.
And and Fran's telling him, do you know what something like that can do to a person? Like torturing someone. And Brighton's again not really saying anything that would make it seem like he understands what, that can do to a person. So Fran's like, oh, we need to stop at a video store. I'm going to rent Carrie.
Yep.
Um, and Fran, and then Brighton's kind of like, well, it's too late. Anyway, and Fran says it's never too late to right a wrong you did to another human being. Well, at that point, the taxi driver kind of chimes in. And I didn't get the exact line he used. Do you have it?
Yeah. Unless that human being has been shattered into a million miserable pieces.
Mm-hmm. Fran, though, continues talking with Brighton.
Yeah. She says, "Thank you. I work alone,"
Yeah.
or something like that.
Turns back to Brighton, is still talking to him. But again, the taxi driver is kind of interjecting, calling her a hypocrite.
Right. Because Fran said, your behavior could scar that little girl for the rest of her life. And the taxi driver jumps in, and you should know, hypocrite.
Mhm. Yeah. And then it turns out that, well, first of all, Fran kind of tries to look at the ID at the front and totally butchered a foreign name. And the taxi driver notes he shares the cab. And it turns out he's Jeffrey Needleman, who Fran went with to school with. And he's like, don't you remember me? Like, and shoved in the locker, a kick me sign on my head. And Brighton kind of notes, isn't that supposed to be on your back? And he says, well, they wanted me to see it coming. So
Correct.
obviously, like, was very harshly bullied in school. And Fran's like, oh, Jeffrey, what have you been up to since high school? And he says, shock therapy.
Correct.
And Brian's like, oh, you tortured him? And she's like, it was a requirement, instead of taking a foreign language or something. It wasn't just her, it was the entire school. It was like a requirement.
Correct.
And so Brighton's now using what Fran said to him against her by saying, God will punish you to Fran. And then Jeffrey notes, well, Fran, don't you remember? You said you would go out with me on Sunday. And she said, not Sunday, someday. Someday. And that was because you were standing on a ledge. And then he's like, well, is it someday now? And she's like, oh, well, I'm so busy. Um, and I don't know if I'd find the time. And Brighton, of course, chimes in at this point, and he's like, what about Saturday? You're free Saturday. That's your day off. And
Exactly.
yeah, and she's like, oh, I don't know. I might be busy, at the hospital visiting the little boy with the injury because of the high heel to the butt.
I might have to go to visit that poor little boy in the hospital after that unfortunate high heel to the butt accident.
Yeah, yeah. So again, I mean, this entire scene is just showing like obviously what Fran was telling Brighton's good, but she hasn't necessarily practiced it herself her entire life. And of
Correct.
course, Brighton kind of delights in causing chaos by encouraging her, or getting her to go on this date with
Right.
Jeff.
He's enjoying that, all of the things Fran was saying to him now apply to her.
Exactly. Yeah. Is there anything else you wanted to add to that scene?
I don't think so. I guess the one thing I'll note is that when Jeffrey Needleman tries to jog Fran's memory, she doesn't remember him initially, but I think Brighton makes a comment about how pathetic he sounds, and she's like, Jeffrey Needleman. That's what gets.
Yeah, because Brighton says something along like, "What a washed up loser."
Yeah, what a loser.
Or
What a miserable
something like
loser, I
that.
think. Yeah. And that's what jogs her memory. Yeah. I think that's the only thing I wanted to add. So I guess I'll take us back to the Sheffield home to Saturday. And it's Saturday, not Saturday night. Fran comes down the stairs wearing a bathrobe, and she actually, before she comes down, Brighton shouts up at her, to come down, to hurry up. She has to get ready for her date because the meter's running. And so she comes down and she's in her bathrobe, and she says she's not feeling well. She has a thermometer. She asks, "Do I sound like I'm coming down with a cold?" And Niles snarkily responds, "Constantly." So anyway, she says, "See if I have a temperature." And Brighton interjects, "Not the old, thermometer light bulb trick." And Fran gives him a look, and Niles looks at the thermometer and says, 112 is fine. Fran's like, "Damn halogen lamps." And she's reminded that it's never too late to right a wrong. Now, meanwhile, Cece follows Maxwell into the room, and she's begging him, "Please, Maxwell, I'm begging you. It will only take a few minutes. You don't even have to like it." And Niles chimes in, "There's a speech she knows by heart." Yeah. And so, of course, with Niles' comment, we think that she's begging him for something physical, shall we say. But she's not. She's instead asking him to read the play written by her therapist. And we learned this by Maxwell explaining that he never reads plays written by friends or relatives, or he used, I think, a French term, your therapist. And Cece explains that, she told her therapist that Maxwell would read it, and we're on the verge of a breakthrough. And, I really don't want to upset him. And Niles again jumps in, "Oh, good. Maybe he'll find a personality we like." And of course, Fran chimes in, explaining that she agrees with Maxwell that it doesn't make sense to do business favors for friends or relatives. And she explains,
ironic.
A little bit, yes. She explains, "I have an Uncle Aaron," and I think that's the point at which Maxwell and Cece both sigh, roll their eyes, and sit down. And so Fran continues, "He manufactured hernia trusses and gave one to his friend Murray. Well, P.S. He put it on backwards, Murray, cut off his circulation, double amputation, and I'm not talking about his legs." Anyway, I thought that was an amusing anecdote. Anyway, so Fran's saying that she doesn't want to, she feels guilty that she, for the made up Jewish holiday that she took off for. And Max was like, "Mean there's no matzah day?" No. Anyway, I mean, if Maxwell was dumb enough to fall for that, he sort of deserved Fran taking an extra day off, because there is no such thing as matzah day. But anyway, Brighton points out that Fran has a date, and Maxwell says, "Go, have fun." Basically, like, "Go on, get out of here. It's okay. Go." Yeah. Do you have anything you want to add to that scene?
Well, I guess, do you want to tie in the brief thing that comes after?
I'll let you do it.
Okay. Then no.
Okay. I'll let you take over.
Okay. Well, just that, Gracie is going to go to ballet. Maggie's going to take her.
Oh,
Um,
right.
and Maggie, at first Fran's trying to use Gracie as an excuse not to go. Well, I need to take her to ballet. And and Gracie's like, no, Maggie's going to take me. She has a huge crush on the teacher. And, and Maggie's like, yeah, he's super talented. You should see his impression of Liza Minnelli. And like, Fran kind of, shares a look with the other adults. And she's like, I'm going to have a talk with her.
Yeah.
Because, yeah.
And
But
that
yeah.
continues, that sort of storyline continues through some of the later scenes as well.
Mm-hmm.
With Fran needing to have a conversation with Maggie to explain what's going on.
Yep. So we're then at the restaurant because obviously Fran eventually did end up going. And the guy at the front,
The maitre d'.
the host, the
Oh.
maitre d', Fran shows up and she's like, I'm looking for a guy. And he's like, you might want to try the happy hour at the Black
Angus.
Angus. But then Jeffrey stands up from the bar and comes close.
How does he stand up from the bar? Is it in an
He has
artful
like
fashion?
he has a big, like, how would you describe the bag?
Well, even
Like,
before the bag, it's sort of like he
Mhm.
hears her voice and he like sort of jumps up and then
Mhm.
knocks everything down around him.
Yes. And he has this large bag that's kind of also knocking into things. And he approaches her and calls her scrumdiddlyumptious or something like
Yep.
that.
Something like that. Yeah.
And Fran kind of turns to the maitre d' and says, he's a war hero. As if attempting to explain his behavior, I guess.
Exactly.
And they go to, the maitre d' is going to go sit him down, and uh, Jeffrey pulls out like one of those wooden ball
Seat
things.
covers.
Yeah, seat covers. And of course, Fran's just kind of looking at it like, oh. And he's like, oh, don't worry, I have her one too. And she's like, no, like, I don't sit on wooden balls. I'm not comfortable sitting on wooden balls, at least not on the first date.
Correct.
Well, they're now eating their food, and Jeffrey's trying to engage in conversation by being like, you know how many men pick their nose? And Fran's, of course, trying to like, she's eating because she's like trying to like not get into that topic. But he's like, he continues on. 1 out of 5. And she kind of notes, oh, you must have a million stories. You shouldn't, waste it on me. You should write it or something. And he's like, oh, no, I've actually written, a screenplay. And she starts to say, oh, I work for a Broadway. And then she realizes, and so she changes it last minute to bus driver. And of
Correct.
course, Jeffrey's like, there's a bus driver who can afford to pay a nanny. And she just responds, unions.
Exactly.
And anyway, so he seems to buy that last minute cover. But he pulls out something that's for Fran, and she's like, oh, you shouldn't have, and she opens it. Oh, a blue frost eyeshadow kit. And he goes, it's your blue frost eyeshadow kit. Remember when, the teacher confiscated it? Well, I swiped it from her. And Fran's like, oh, you've kept it all this time. How nice, or I
How
don't remember the
sweet.
word. How
She said,
sweet. And then she kind of turns, and yet oddly disturbing, which,
exactly.
yeah. um, and then Jeffrey's like, Fran, like, you told me one day you'd do it with me.
No, what he says is something like, I know you didn't want to do it with me in high school.
Oh yeah. But why don't we do it right here on the floor? And of course, Fran's taking this the wrong way.
Understandably.
And she's like, check, please. But it turns out he wants to dance. And they end up doing the hustle. And of course, at first, Fran's kind of like, oh, I don't know. I don't know if I remember it. But of course, as soon as the music turns on, they're both dancing perfectly to the hustle.
Exactly.
Although at the end, she does note she may have pulled a hustle muscle.
She did note that, yes.
And but yeah, she, compliments him on being a good dancer. He notes, he has like an 84-year-old partner, Arthur Murray.
Yeah,
She can turn the beat around.
exactly.
And then and then he's like, "Fran, marry me."
Well,
And
did you catch what she said before he asked her to marry him?
no.
She said, "This wasn't such a bad date after all."
Oh. And then
And he says, "Good, marry me." And she
yeah.
thought he was kidding.
Yeah, you're kidding, aren't you? Um and
No,
you can tell she's going to try to, let him down,
go ahead, sorry.
but yeah, but then we see he's on the ledge out the window. "Jeffrey, don't jump." And then she turns to the mayor. Did he pay the check?
Exactly.
So,
I
you
just
want
want to
to
I
yeah.
just want to chime in on a couple points. One, after he says, "Good, marry me,"
Mhm.
she thought he was kidding, but like he clearly wasn't, because then he gets down on one knee,
Mhm. Yeah.
which, I mean, for any, I think, reasonable person, one date is not enough time before a marriage proposal.
Mhm.
I feel pretty confident in that assessment.
Yeah.
Um,
Although I will say, um, my brother-in-law did jokingly propose to my sister on their first date,
but
and they did
jokingly,
eventually get married.
keyword, jokingly.
Yes. Yes.
And I take it he did not threaten to jump out a window or jump off a ledge
No.
to his death.
No.
Okay. So those are the major differences.
Yes. Well, among others.
Oh, yeah. I mean, for just the details we have, those
Yeah.
are the major differences. He was joking and did not threaten to kill himself if she didn't say yes.
Yes. Exactly.
So yes, I'd be happy to take us onto the ledge. So as you point out, Fran says, Jeffrey, don't jump. And she says a couple different iterations of "don't jump," including "you've too much to live for." And you know, he says, "I mean it. I'm going to jump." And she says, "Jeffrey, please, I'll do whatever you want." And he turns to her, "Sleep with me." What's your second choice? A second date? What else you got? And he's like constantly like threatening that he's gonna jump. And so Fran actually goes out onto the ledge with him, and as she's climbing out the window, the maitre d' asks her if she maybe wants to take her high heels off, and she's like, "Are you kidding? That'll throw off my balance completely."
Yes.
Which is also interesting in and of itself, that she needs her high heels for balance on a very tiny, very skinny, tiny ledge.
Mhm.
Um, so she climbed. Also mentioned that, right when we cut to when he's standing on the ledge, she leans out and she goes, "Oh no!" And the maitre d' is like, "Did he jump?" She's like, "No, I just touched pigeon poop," or something like that,
Yeah.
which
Mhm.
is, I thought, kind of silly.
Leaned on pigeon poop.
There we go. Thank you. So anyway, she's out on the ledge. Hold my hand, hold my hand. He takes her hand, saying, "I'm gonna jump. Let go of my hand. Let go of my hand." And
Mhm.
then she's like, "Oh, Jeffrey, look at all those people down there staring up at us." And he's like, "Are you wearing underwear?" She's like, "Of course I'm wearing underwear." And then she's like double checking, which I
Mhm.
thought was kind of a silly thing. Like, if they're that high up, even if she wasn't wearing any underwear, it
Mhm.
wouldn't make a difference, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, so Jeffrey is of the opinion that if I can't have you, I have nothing to live for. And she's like, "That
Mhm.
can't be. You've got friends." He says, "None. You've family, estranged. A dog, he bit me." And she's like, "What about your writing?" He's like, "Oh, that's not going to go anywhere in this town. In this business, you need to know somebody to get anywhere." And she's like, "I know somebody. I work for Maxwell Sheffield, the big Broadway producer." And he's like, "I thought you said you worked for a Broadway bus driver." She's like, "Yeah, he is. He wasn't going to give up that pension," or something like that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I don't think I have anything else on the ledge.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add. So we then are back in the Sheffield home in the living room, and Brooke and Brighton are in the living room, and now they're just looking at a potato with toothpicks in it, which is what, Fran had said that she and Val used to do for their science projects.
Right.
And Brighton's kind of looking at it, and he's like, "I don't think this is enough to get us an A." And Brooke kind of says, in a certain tone, "I don't need an A. I always get an A. I want to see what an F feels like." And of course Brighton's like, but I need an A. Um, and he doesn't understand why she's being like this. They've been friends, and she's like, I'm a woman now. I have needs. And I think he says something similar, like, I'm a man or something. Did
He
you
says,
catch that one?
I have needs too. I need an A in science.
Oh, yeah. Okay. And then Brooke kind of gets up and goes, men. And then she leaves, and Brighton says women at the same time as, um, Maxwell and Niles are coming through.
Right.
And Maxwell's like, kind of like, oh, women are more emotional. Um,
I have it if
and
you want it.
yeah, if you want to give the exact stuff, go for it.
Women are just different from us, son. They're more emotional. When I get a bad review, I don't run to Niles and say, I need a hug. And Niles chimes in, well, there was that one time in New Haven.
Hmm.
And
But that's because it was scathing.
that review is scathing. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And so Niles and Maxwell leave. Go ahead,
Yeah.
continue.
And Brighton's kind of like after him, well, thanks, Scott. Like, that was not helpful.
Right. Thanks for
Uh,
nothing.
yeah. And he's like, and Fran's running through at this time as well. So ignoring Brighton's pleas. And so Brighton's just like, all right, I'll grow up by myself.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's like a quick transition scene. If you don't mind, I'll do it
By all
quickly.
means.
Where Fran's rushing towards Maxwell's office, and they're in the hallway, and Maggie's there. And Maggie's like, oh, do I look, like, what do you think of her makeup? And it turns out that the ballet instructor that she has a crush on did her makeup. So once again, Fran's like, I'll need to have a talk with her.
Just
Um,
not now.
yes, she is in a rush. So do you want to take us to the office, Debbie?
Before I do, can I just throw in one line?
Uh-huh.
When, you know, Fran comes in, Brighton comments about how he's, really he's upset about the situation with Brooke. I think he says he's guilty, and Fran says, "Oh, honey, take her, don't take her, do whatever you want to do." And
Yeah,
that's
and
what
he's like,
prompted him to say what the line
all
you
right,
said.
I'll grow up by myself.
Exactly. So, all right, so we're now in Maxwell's office, and we come into the scene, and Maxwell and Niles are in the office. Cece's sitting out on the patio with the phone, and Maxwell is continuing the conversation that he and Niles were having before. It was not a hug, but a pat on the back. I just had a particularly hard review and was looking for a little bit of understanding. And Niles says, "You wept openly, sir. It was very uncomfortable for me." And so Fran comes in, and she mentions that.
But it was 1972, so they were
Oh,
in touch with your feelings.
thank you. Yes. So Fran comes in, and she's trying to explain there's an emergency, and that her date is threatening to kill. Like, she's on a date. Oh, how's it going? And I thought this was the most interesting thing she said in this episode. I've had better. I've had worse. It's kind of up in the air. I gotta
Mhm.
wonder what's so much worse than having
Yeah.
your date threaten to kill himself by jumping out a window, or climbing out a window, jumping off a ledge on your date,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Maybe at the end of this, at the end of our conversation, you and I should hypothesize what would make a worse date.
Mm.
Um, we don't have to, but it's just like, what could be
Well,
worse?
that's like, I wonder if she's like thinking back to season 1, how she would rank her date with what's his face? That actor.
Oh, that one's bad. Yeah. Okay.
I
Yeah.
would I would just be curious
Brock
as to
Storm.
her ranking. What's her scale?
Yeah, no, that's fair. I mean, Brock Storm, at least he wasn't gonna kill himself, but he was so self-centered. Like, didn't they
Mhm.
have just like appetizers,
Very
and she was still
easy
hungry?
too.
And
Mhm.
yeah, okay, no, that's bad, but like,
Mhm.
I don't know. I feel like Date trying to kill himself is worse.
Mhm.
That's just me.
Yeah.
Um, we do not recommend climbing out of windows and jumping off ledges. We do not recommend that. It's very painful. Anyway, so Cece comes in back into the office, and Fran's upset with her, like, why wouldn't you take my emergency call? And Cece says, the last time you had the operator break through, it was to tape The Bold and the Beautiful. And so of course Max was like, okay, what's going on? Like, and Fran answers regarding The Bold and the Beautiful that two characters were going to get married, and she then, so, well, she's his mother. And he's like, no, back to the date. And she explains that her date is about to kill himself. You know, you have to read his play. It's a matter of life and death. And Cece chimes in, well, if she gets to show you hers, I get to show you mine. And
Mhm.
Fran's just like, oh, that ain't worth it. Let him jump. Like,
Mhm.
you know, it's just not worth it. And I mean, eventually, finally, Maxwell understands that the only thing stopping Jeffrey from jumping off the ledge and killing himself is Maxwell going to read his play. And so Maxwell agrees to go. And of course, as the door opens, poor Brighton's there and he like is looking for adult guidance. You know, Fran and Maxwell have rushed off and he's like, I need to speak to someone now. And Cece says,
Mhm.
Aunt Cece's still here and smiles down at him. And Brighton just gets this look on his face and says, it can wait.
Mhm. Yeah, but her smile's kind of like, how would you describe it?
Devious.
Not a pleasant smile. Yeah. Yes, devious.
But like, I kind of wonder, like, why? Like, what would she get from, you know, what would she gain from torturing Brighton or giving him bad advice in this on this score?
I
You know what I
don't
mean?
know. Who knows with Cece?
I mean, that's fair. I mean,
Yeah.
it is interesting that here she's showing interest in one of the Sheffield children,
Mhm.
which is
Yeah. Yeah.
unusual for her.
Mhm. Yeah, and earlier in this scene though, before Fran's finally be able to like explain the whole story, each of the three take turns talking about, well, I hope it's not the story of the hernia or the liposuction or Uncle Jack's dependence on Beano. So
Yep.
like it's interesting how all three of them are kind of like, oh, here's Fran again, like with her story. Um,
Right. And so many different reasons that the date could be terrible that are
mhm.
her fault. Like she told the wrong story, but no, no, no. Here are the guys trying to jump off the building.
Yeah, yeah. So we are then back in the restaurant.
Yep.
Jeffrey is still on the ledge eating soup.
Hmm.
Maxwell's reading. Fran's actually reading over his shoulder, and like stops him from turning the page because she's also kind of like reading out loud to herself, like mumbling, and like
And
you know,
gesturing.
and Maxwell's kind of like, we are, there. This is kind of time sensitive. Um,
Right.
But anyway, Fran goes to check on Jeffrey, see if he wants anything else because he hands back the soup bowl. And he's like, oh, I'm watching your weight. And she's like, why? You don't want to make a bigger pit down there or something, hole down there.
So he gives her the soup bowl back. And then she says, do you want something sweet? And he says, no, I'm watching my weight. And she says, what's the matter? You're afraid you're going to make a bigger hole? And he's like, oh,
Hmm.
okay.
Yeah.
And
So she's browsing like the different options and telling him. And then she kind of notices a little piece of chocolate cake and pops in her mouth right when he's asking about cake. And she's like, oh no. But then Jeffrey turns his attention back to Maxwell and it's like, I don't hear laughing. And immediately Maxwell, chuckles and he's like, oh, which part was it? Which part was it? And Maxwell's like, the funny part. And Jeffrey goes, he hates it. And Fran's like trying to comfort him, like, hey, this is the guy who passed on cats.
yep.
And Maxwell, defends himself. He's like, it was singing pussycat people in a large trash can. And then Fran's like, I have two words, still running.
Bingo.
So then also at this point, while Fran's talking with Jeffrey, she somewhat like joking, like pushes on him. And he kind of loses his balance and he writes himself. Um, Maxwell finishes reading this screenplay and he says it's a brilliant play. He wants to option it. And Jeffrey's so excited at this prospect, he falls backwards.
Yep.
And of course, Maxwell and Fran immediately run to the window and look down, and you hear, I'm all right. And it turns out he fell into a very large pile of garbage. And Fran notes, well, he's lucky he lives in New York.
Correct. Yeah. I think Maxwell's exact words were he landed right in that huge mountain of garbage. Like
Hmm.
huge mountain of garbage. Just sounds
Yeah.
terrible.
Yeah. Yeah. So, unless you have anything to add, can you take us to the living room?
I would be happy to. I just have one question for you because I can't recall. Is this the first time we've heard that Maxwell passed on cats?
I feel like it's the first time.
Okay. I couldn't remember if we had heard that previously or not. That was my question for you.
Okay.
Okay. I am happy to take us to the living room. Um, so Brighton is all dressed up for the dance, and he looks very cute. And Fran's taking pictures like any adult would do in the situation. And she says to him, you and Brooke are gonna be the cutest couple at the dance. And he's like, yeah, but like those guys are gonna tear me to shreds or whatever. And Fran says to him, you just remember that you're more mature than they are. You walk in there, hold your head up high, look them square in the eye, and say, "So's your mother." Which I understand is an insult, but I don't quite understand it. Anyway, so Maxwell comes in and turns to Brighton and says something along the lines of, "So Brighton, it's your first date alone with a girl. Do you have any questions?" And Brighton's like, "Yeah, why am I going with Brooke?" Like, that's his question. But he doesn't have any questions about like how to act with a girl, how to, be on a date. The doorbell rings and they open the door and there's Brooke. And Brighton's reaction to her can be summed up in one word. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And he says it a couple different times because you did a great job describing her previously, where she was very nerdy and her hair's in these tight braids and pigtails and she has these glasses.
It's like Hermione coming down for the Yule Ball in book 4.
Yes. Thank you for bringing in Harry Potter reference. We need some of those. But so it's like night and day. She's so pretty now. She's not wearing her glasses. Her hair is out of the braids and it's kind of poofy, sort of reminiscent of Fran's hair, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, uh, Brighton turns to Maxwell and says, "Dad, can we have that talk now?" And obviously, they don't have any sort of talk, but Fran says to him, "You did the right thing, and God smiled on you." And Brighton walks towards her, and Fran says to Maxwell, "God, Maybelline, and a half a box of Kleenex."
Mm-hmm.
So, and then they go off on their date to the dance, and Maggie comes down and asks how she looks, and Fran tells her she looks ravishing as always. Because Maggie got all dressed up, nice and pretty, to go pick Gracie up from ballet, and Maggie makes a comment about how she doesn't know who's cuter, the ballet teacher or his roommate Chuck. And Fran's like, "Now it's time for us to have a little talk," and leads Maggie back upstairs. And we don't hear their conversation other than periodically from Maggie, "Oh, oh, yeah, oh, now I get it. Now she understands."
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Yep. Yeah. And then the last credit scene is just the entire Sheffield family, Fran, Niles, and Cece doing the hustle together.
correct.
Yeah. So before we dive into our shticks, I did just want to, if you're okay, talk overall a bit about this
Sure,
episode.
absolutely.
So I have just several problems with the
I'm
behavior.
sure you do. Continue.
Yes.
Where do you want to start?
Yes, I have several issues. Well, okay.
I knew
I
you
think
would.
I think we all agree. Don't bully people. Don't do it.
Correct.
It really can leave lasting scars on people. Emotional, unfortunately, I'm sure sometimes physical. But again, don't bully. Same point. Jeffrey, his behavior is toxic. Um, like that
Yeah.
manipulation, that's a classic emotionally abusive type of thing where he's threatening to kill himself if she doesn't sleep with him or go out with him
Or
or
marry
whatever.
him.
Yeah. I mean, there's a difference between like someone being in an actual mental health crisis and using it to manipulate others to get what you want. Um, and I don't believe he was, and this is my interpretation. If you have a different interpretation, I don't think he was actually suicidal. I think he knew that Fran had before like agreed to go out with him someday because he was on a ledge, and
Hmm.
that was his response whenever she turned him down. because it worked for him before. Does that make any sense?
Right. I mean, he was not actually suicidal. He was manipulating her, is what you're
Yes.
saying, which I agree with.
Yes. Because here's the thing. She just got back in his life, so there's no
Exactly.
no need for him to say without her he has nothing because
He
they've
didn't
had
have
one
her.
dinner. Yes.
He didn't have her except for the 10 minutes they'd had dinner together and that cab
Yeah.
ride.
Yes. And so like I just I would yeah. It's toxic behavior and again for any listeners who might be in a relationship, if you have a partner who's kind of doing this to you to try to manipulate you, like I mean, be aware because that can be emotionally abusive. Um, do you agree, disagree with me?
No,
I know this is a sitcom, but it's just it's very toxic, that kind of behavior. And again, to some extent, you can understand having like he was psychologically scarred from the bullying and don't bully. But also don't behave like that later. Like,
right. I mean, it's sort of outlandish, right? Like it not only is it manipulative, but it's outlandish. Like,
mhm,
I mean, to the point where, he's waiting for that someday, even though they've been out of high school 10, 12 years now, right?
mhm,
He held on to her blue frost eyeshadow kit.
mhm,
Like, if Fran was truly that important to him, wouldn't he have reached out to her in the decade or so since they've been in high school,
mhm,
like to try to have a relationship with her or something? Like, I don't know. You're right.
mhm.
You're right. That's it's problematic.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, I don't want to downplay his experience in high school, but I also don't think that allows him to act like that later on, um, either. Does that like I don't know if I'm phrasing this right. I'm
No,
just saying like that's toxic behavior. Um,
yeah.
very emotionally manipulative.
I
And
mean,
I'm
also
I'm
sort of,
glad I'm glad Fran put her foot down when he's like, "Sleep with me," when he's
yeah,
like saying his demands, and she's like, "No." Well, she doesn't say that. She's like, "What's your second option?"
your second choice. Go another date. What else you got? And he's like, I'm gonna jump. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, it also, but also think about it this way: if Fran wasn't as nice a person or as good a person as she is, like, she very easily could have just been like, I haven't spoken to you in the decade since we've graduated from high school. I don't really care if you say you're gonna
Mhm.
jump. Go ahead, jump. Bye.
Yeah, yeah. Although, like, I feel like Fran doesn't really acknowledge her role in bullying either, because she brushes it off like it was a requirement.
That's true.
Um, so I don't think she's ever really I don't recall her apologizing, did
I
she?
don't think she did. No.
And so, like, again, I would have hoped that she would have realized, like what she did in high school, and that's not right. Obviously, she's saying all this to Brighton now, but it would be good if she could self-reflect a bit and apologize for her role in his tormenting in high school. Um, but yeah, you're right too. Like she does obviously not want him to jump, except if Cece's gonna let her therapist read, Maxwell's gonna read Cece's
Maxwell, right?
screenplay. So anyway, that stood out to me because I know it's a sitcom. They're trying to use this, I guess, for, it's a outrageous kind of situation, but I just, uh.
Okay.
Yeah, that's toxic. And then also, obviously the whole Brooke sub or like other plot. Um, it's that classic trope of like, oh, once she takes off her glasses and puts on some makeup, she's now worthwhile, which again, bit problematic. In my eyes. You might not care, but
See, no, I actually expected you to start with the Brooke plot
yeah.
instead
Well,
of Jeffrey.
yeah. So anyway, sorry for my
No,
tangent
it's fine.
rant.
I on the Brooke front, I do see why it is it is not ideal. But I
Mhm.
do also think like,
It's also a classic
yeah,
rom-com plot, like
correct.
the big reveal, the makeover kind of thing.
Right. Like the nerdy girl is actually gorgeous. She the ugly duckling is a beautiful swan.
Yes.
So
Yeah. So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
I will just sort of tangentially, just because primarily because I didn't think to mention it in the last substantive scene, when Brooke is at the door, you know, not only is she glammed up, but like her the way she speaks is different. And it's not just that her voice isn't as nasal anymore.
Mhm.
You know, it's as if she's been coached, probably by Fran. You know, she says, "Hi, Brighton, ready to go, Brighton." The way she's emphasizing his name is like
Mhm.
clearly a flirtatious move.
Yes.
Um,
And she seems very confident.
Correct, which she wasn't in any of the other scenes we saw her in.
Mhm. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yep. Did you
Okay.
have any overarching?
I no, but I mean, you raise a lot of valid points. Um,
Okay.
yeah, no, I don't have anything to add on that front, unfortunately.
Okay. So, do you want to jump into favorite fashion?
I would love to. I guess can we start with what Brooke is wearing at the end?
Sure.
Or actually, why don't we talk about what Brooke wears throughout the episode? So I
Okay.
think in the first scene we see her in, she's in her school uniform, right?
Yes.
The second scene, the one when they're at school, she's in the school uniform. The
Mhm.
third scene when they're back in the living room, she's not in the school uniform. She's wearing kind of a sciency type shirt. I think it has like butterflies on it. Um, she's like wearing a cardigan and then like different it has like colorful bugs on it. So it's like emphasizing that she's, you know, kind of nerdy. Um, and then in the last scene, which is the dress that we probably want to talk the most about, is when she's all glammed up for the dance. She's wearing a black and gold dress. I think it has very thin straps. But like she's even standing differently, right? Like she's standing
Mhm.
more, as you put it, she's more confident. Her hair is in a halfway up, half down. Like I don't know how to describe her hair. It's done up nicely, and she's wearing
Mhm.
makeup and earrings. And I actually rather like the dress she's wearing.
Mhm.
Did you have any thoughts on it?
It wasn't as memorable to me. I have two different outfits
Oh,
that I
please go ahead.
would flag. So, I actually liked Maggie's outfit when she's trying to talk to Fran in the hallway, where when she got her makeup done. So she's wearing like a pink skirt and like her top's a white top embroidered with flowers. And then I thought it was cute. And then Fran's outfit in the last scene, I also like. She has a black vest, a white kind of frilly long sleeve top, a plaid skirt.
Right.
Um, yeah. So those
I
are
liked
my two picks.
I liked that the second outfit. I honestly didn't notice what Maggie was wearing
Hmm.
in that scene. I did notice what she was wearing um in the last scene
Hmm.
where she's wearing kind of like a light colored floral dress with a lacy like thin sweater over it or thin
Yeah.
cardigan.
Hmm.
Which to me sort of felt a little dated.
Hmm.
I'm pretty sure I wore very similar things, you know,
Hmm.
go back a
And I
couple
think more
decades.
so the dress than the cardigan, just because.
Oh,
Um,
interesting. I thought the cardigan more so than the dress
oh, interesting.
because I'm pretty sure I have a cardigan just like that I have not worn in probably 2 decades.
Hmm.
So maybe I don't know if I still have it, but I remember having it.
Hmm.
Um, I I actually really liked most of what Fran wore in this episode. I liked the outfit she wore to pick Brighton up at school. It's a white shirt with a red jacket and a black skirt with white, um, long thin triangles. I guess
Isn't that like a repeat
I think it
outfit?
is, but I couldn't figure out which episode she'd worn it in previously.
It looked familiar.
Yeah, I like that outfit. Um, I also what was I going to say? I liked the dress that Fran wore on her date with Jeffrey. it's a the dress. I shouldn't call it a black based dress, but it has black trim and it has like orange with a pattern, yellow with a pattern, teal with a pattern, and then black, and it's hard thick horizontal stripes. I like the dress. I didn't like it with the cardigan she wore, but I thought it was a very flattering dress and something I would probably wear.
Hmm. Yeah. Any other fashion you wanted to discuss?
I think we've seen her bathrobe before.
Yes, I think it is a repeat bathrobe.
Excellent. Because I noted we've seen this bathrobe before. So I'm
Hmm.
glad you agreed. I wasn't just hallucinating it.
Yep. Nope. We've seen it before.
Excellent. Do you want to take us to our notable New Yorkers?
Yes. So we have several in this episode. Um, some of which we've already kind of talked in passing.
Yep.
But let's see. Sorry.
That's
Just
fine.
scanning
Did you
my note.
did you think that there
Hokey
were
pokey.
okay? Um, that's a good one. I was gonna ask, did you think there were as many notable New Yorkers in this episode as usual?
Well, there are some. Like
Yeah.
I can't really count, but I mean, we've talked about before, like Carrie.
Yep.
He talks about Bergdorf's. Um, she did call the hall monitor a real little Nazi, which,
I
you
didn't
know,
care for.
yeah. Um, then there is, let's see, I do
Want me to jump
maybe
in?
not as many as the others, but Liza Minnelli was
Hmm.
mentioned. Um, the Turn the Beat Around is a song from the 70s, I believe.
It is a song. I did not note what year it was from.
Well, I don't know the exact year, but I think it's more of like a disco era type of song.
Right.
I didn't know if Arthur Murray is a real establishment or
Yes,
not.
it is.
Okay.
Arthur Murray is, according to their webpage, they do dance centers that provide dance lessons,
Oh.
including beginning dance lessons, ballroom dance lessons, wedding, like if you're going to get married and you want to choreograph a first dance type lesson.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, that's a real place.
Yeah, and the Hustle is obviously a dance.
So just to jump in on that one, it was number one, according to Wikipedia, it was number one on the US Billboard Hot 100 and Hot Soul singles during the summer of 1975.
Hmm.
If you just want to
Which
put
is
some time frame in it.
interesting because that would like if you're going off the timeline previously established, that class of like 81 or something, right?
I thought it was
Or
1980, but
oh, okay. But still 75 would predate high school then.
correct.
But anyway,
Um,
um
I'll, I'm going back to my notes for the gym teacher, which was the episode where it's class in 1982. Sorry,
82. Okay. So we were both wrong.
we were both wrong.
um but yeah, so cats obviously.
Can I just jump in on Cats?
Yeah.
So, Cats was a musical produced by Andrew Lloyd Webber, and it's based on T.S. Eliot's poetry collection called Old Possum's Book of Practical Cats.
Oh, I didn't know it was related to that.
Yeah. Um, Remind me to come back to Cats in our future fun.
Okay. But yeah, I mean, I think those were the major ones. Are there any others that you picked up on?
So I think you already mentioned Alfalfa
Hmm.
from Little
Yeah,
Rascals. Did you notice there was a bobblehead in the cab
I did not.
behind Brighton and Fran? I
I
think
did.
it's Bambi. I thought it was Bambi.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
so it caught my attention. There's a reference to National Geographic magazine. There was a reference to, which we mentioned before, Bold and the Beautiful. And just for those, you mentioned Carrie before, and for those who are unaware, that was according to Wikipedia, a 1976 horror film about a 16-year-old girl who is consistently bullied at school and the gruesome revenge she exacts.
Hmm.
Um, I just wanted to mention that. And that's all I got.
Yeah. Okay.
So I thought this was a much
Yeah.
shorter list.
Hmm.
than we usually have.
Um,
So I guess we're up to Yiddish.
Yes.
So I'm again going to point out that Fran, as in Maxwell's office, she comments about how the date is not a total loss because the Clams Casino is to die for. Clams are not kosher. Everyone who's listened to any of our podcasts where I've talked about food knows that already. So just going to throw that out there. And then just the second thing, she makes a comment and then Brighton repeats it that it's never too late to right a wrong done to another human being. And one of the before Yom Kippur during the high holidays, one thing that you're supposed to do is to apologize to the people you wronged during the past year, because while God is able to forgive sins against God, God cannot forgive sins against other people. And so it's strange to me that she's saying it's never too late to right the wrong. I mean, I guess that's true, but ideally you would try to right your wrongs before the end of the year, before the book of life is sealed for the year, because you want good things to happen to you, right? So I just wanted to mention that because it caught my attention. Was there any Yiddish that I totally did not notice?
No, this is not actually, but it's amusing. The Matzah Day is the fake holiday that the fake Jewish holiday that Fran made up.
Yes, that is not a Jewish holiday. I don't remember if we talked about matzah before, but if we haven't,
we have.
Okay, then I won't remind people what it is.
Yeah, but I don't really think there was any Yiddish really.
Yeah, I didn't think so. I think there was some French, but not Yiddish.
Yeah.
All right. Would you like to take us to our 90s nostalgia?
Yeah. So again, Fran taking the photographs of Brighton, and then Brighton and Brooke was very nostalgic.
Yeah.
I'll give you a turn.
Old cars.
And you got an old school bus too in this one.
We did, yes.
And the taxi cab too. These days, people are more apt to use Uber or Lyft than the classic yellow cab. Although
I think that's
they're
right.
still around.
They are still around, yes. Or at least last time I was in New York, they were. Do you want to go take a turn? I have one more.
Go ahead. You can.
Fran says they're going to go to the video store to rent Carrie.
Yep. Yeah. And then also the cordless phone that Cece's using in the background.
Good point.
It just looks very 90s.
Yes. Yes, very much so. So, okay, I have nothing else. Do you have anything else in 90s nostalgia?
Nope.
Okay, I've got just a couple of things in our future fun. I said, remind me to come back to cats. This is a point that Fran and others will make to sort of poke at Maxwell that he passed on cats. That he this comes up repeatedly, and as I think I've mentioned before, there is a whole rivalry existing between Maxwell Sheffield and Andrew Lloyd Webber, and so it's amusing that cats, the cats at the time that, as you noted, at the time that this aired, Cats was still running. Cats was actually the longest running show in Broadway history up until the point at which Phantom surpassed it, and that only happened maybe 10 years ago. So Cats is such a huge hit on Broadway that whenever people question Maxwell's judgment, they're going to be like, this from the guy who passed on Cats. We also learn at a later point that Maxwell also passed on Tommy, which was a rock musical, I believe. So sometimes Maxwell's judgment is not so great. So that's point one. Point two, you mentioned, I think, in the first scene where Brighton complains about Brooke having such a nasal voice, and Fran's like, hey, lots of men find that very alluring. This is kind of a running joke, obviously, because of how nasal the Fran and her relatives' voices are. There's an episode, I think a couple seasons from now, where Fran ends up in therapy with her, and she's in a therapy session with her mother Sylvia and her grandmother Yetta, and there's this whole thing about how why are you here, and they start talking, and they talk amongst themselves, and they turn to the therapist who had fallen asleep, And Fran makes, I think it's Fran who makes the comment that, oh, it's okay. A lot of people find our voices very soothing. So there are a bunch of different things like that about nasal voices. Those are the two future fun items I wanted to note. I don't think we see Brooke again. Yeah.
Okay.
So
yeah. So now it's ratings, and it's
yeah.
my turn.
I was gonna say, I think it's your turn. I always hope it's your turn. But I actually think it's your turn this time. So, haha.
I don't know, Debbie. Because again, there were, I don't know. I'm trying to weigh everything because, like I said, I did really have a problem with like the behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Um, hmm. I'll just go with a 2.5.
Okay.
And again, that's largely because of what I already discussed.
No, that's fair. I'm actually going to give it a 3.
Yeah, that's what I was struggling between.
This is an episode that it's fine. Yeah, it has a lot of issues, as you pointed out, which for me, more so than that, it's just not an episode that I go out of my way to watch. Like, if I'm going to watch season 2, I'm going to be watching, episodes that we'll be talking about in a few weeks from now. Like, the episode's titled The Nanny Napper, A Star is Unborn, which I'm super excited to talk about, FYI. Take Back Your Mink. Like, there are other episodes that I enjoy watching more, and like I could pick them off a list and be like, yes, these are the episodes I want to watch. When I put together our like, oh, next week we're going to talk about this episode called The Playwright, I was like, I don't even know what episode that is. Like, it's just not that memorable to me.
Yeah.
I don't believe Maxwell ever actually produces the play, since we never see it. So
yeah.
Maybe I should have mentioned that.
Yeah, quickly. Yeah. Did you think he was serious about that?
I did. Did you?
Both ways. Like, it could be either or for me. Just because his comment about the funny part did kind of seem to indicate maybe not, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I took it as serious because Maxwell finishes and says it's a brilliant play, and Fran says, "Don't lay it on so thick," and he's like, "No, I'm going to option it."
Okay.
Like,
yeah.
But as a continuity thing, I'll mention that we don't see that produced. We do hear about other shows that shows that Maxwell produces. One is called The Widower in season 5. That one gets a lot of buzz. He produces.
I wonder what that's about.
I could not possibly tell you. It's all there in the title. He also, in season 6, he produces a show called Yetta's Letters, which I also will not tell you what that's about, but you can guess. There are other episodes, other shows that we hear about, but we don't see Jeffrey Needleman again. So I don't think his play ever gets produced. For what that's worth.
Okay.
All right. If you don't have anything else.
I do not.
All right. That's all we have for you today. We hope you had a fine time with us as we revisited The Nanny. Join us next week when we'll be discussing episode 25, Everybody Needs a Bubby.
If you would like to reach us on social media, you can find us on Twitter at Nanny Revisited. You can also send us email at afinetimenannyrevisited@gmail.com. Have a great week.